All right, welcome back from that quick break. Had to do some technical hitches, resolve them, and we're glad to be back. Time for us to hit that discuss button where we look at issues. We had told you that the World Health Organization has declared the outbreak of a new coronavirus in China, which is considered a global health emergency. The WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus made the announcement at a press conference in Geneva, where WHO Emergency Committee on Epidemic reportedly met Thursday and recommended designating the outbreak as a public health emergency of international concern. The decision had been almost a unanimous decision. So taking us back to year 2020, where we had the issue of the COVID-19. All right, on today's edition of The Desk, I've got my colleague in-house to help us look at this very interesting talking point making the rounds. Is no other person but Uyo Agbofewe, who's joining me on The Desk this evening to put more poise to the program. Thank you for joining me on The Desk.
Yeah, Anthony, it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's look at the WHO already, declaring another form of coronavirus in China, where it started the last time out. How prepared do you think the world will be this time around? The buzz of the fear seem not to, have been like we saw in 2020 when it did occur, the COVID-19 era.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a trajectory to this whole thing about public health emergencies in Africa in particular. For example, we've not forgotten Ebola from 2014 and how that we're able to also, as it were, bring that to a standstill, fight it to a standstill. We learned a bit from that. And then you fast forward to 2019, 2020, when the COVID-19 became public health emergency of international scale. Of course, Nigeria was not exempted. We understood at that point, for example, how a lot of things got grounded, commerce, travel, and everything else in between. So the question is, what lesson did we learn? How vital are those lessons to this kind of outbreak, which, of course, the World Health Organization has designated as being of global magnitude? I'm sure that the world is pretty much prepared. I believe that Nigeria is also pretty much prepared for this, because we also had to fight a few other outbreaks before now. I mean, in between COVID and this one. Of course, the issue of cholera and Lassa fever, they've also been here. Yeah. So these are issues of public health concern of significance. So I think the world is prepared. I think the world is actually not oblivious of the fact that there will be several outbreaks beyond COVID-19.
But do you think the response is not like we saw previously? Because this is like the sixth time the WHO is making this declaration, and for the sixth time, the previous five, it wasn't. It looked like the declaration was a false one because it didn't come out the way the world expected. So do you think the world is going to take them more serious? Because one of the key issues they're talking about is how quick vaccines can be produced now to fight this recent one. There's this feeling that the WHO is using that to sell vaccines and other, health, products.
It's interesting. First of all, the WHO has partnership with countries. Of course, WHO is made up of countries. Yes. Let's not forget that the WHO, in a sense, in a manner of speaking, is the health subsidiary, all right, of the UN, United Nations, sure. Right? Well, of course, you have dozens of countries that are members of the UN, and by extension, the World Health Organization. Of course, there's a reason it's called the World Health Organization. So the theory that's announcing these public health emergencies is such that the WHO wants to be able to sell vaccines and allied health products. It's arguable, it's debatable, but I think the more focus should be, if you want to fly with that theory, you should be looking at the big pharma, as they call them, the Pfizers of this world, and the other big names in the pharmaceutical industry who are the first to jump into the production of vaccines for things like this. I mean, Anthony, you and I cannot forget in a hurry what Pfizer and Co had done with the issue around COVID-19 and so on and so forth, the commands of it, the policies of it, how that countries were being selected as to how much you can allocate to you and things like that. But for us, I think the first concern should be, what exactly is the message that the WHO is sending? How does that impact people's health across the world? I mean, for the love of heaven, this is a world of over 8 billion human beings. So you come to Nigeria, for example, where we are told we have over 200 million people. If this outbreak were to stretch to Nigeria, how prepared, I am sure that's your first question, how prepared are we? So we should be more concerned about that. We should be doubling down on answering that question in ways that are very practical than paying attention to whether or not this is an idea for. I mean, we also have some of the finest scientists and public health authorities coming from Africa and indeed Nigeria. So if there are concerns or question marks over what the true intent of the WHO is, it's also high time these experts deployed their expertise and resources to find out exactly what is the underlying cause. Now, I take you back in time for perspective. When the issue of COVID-19 started, the first thing was, oh, well, it was an outbreak from Wuhan, somewhere in China. And so on and so forth.
This one is also from China.
From China again, exactly.
Why is all this immunity?
Is it a coincidence it's coming from China? Or, I mean, what exactly is it? Because there's also the theory that there's a lab. In fact, there had been a lab in Wuhan from where this leak, so to speak, had happened. So is it possible this is another laboratory leak coming out from somewhere in China? It also means that this has very negative impact on China, both within China and outside of that country, because at the end of the day, every country is going to be wary of whatever comes out of China going forward, whether it's a human being or an item of utility.
All right, let's move on to the next talking point on our desk here this evening. We're looking at Nigeria's diplomatic relations with Australia. Recently, Australia came out with advisory to its citizens not to go to Borno, Delta, Bayelsa, and Adamawa for security reasons and all that. Considering the fact that Nigeria's insecurity situation is getting better, if not at best, but getting better, and the sudden way Australia did bring out this travel advice prompted Nigeria to want to retaliate by immediately on Sunday sending out advisory to Nigerians to not to travel to Australia because there's been some racial profiling taking place and harassment in the country. Right. This is something Nigeria would not do on a normal day. Usually Nigeria will be very slow in taking such actions. Do you think there's something behind the scene that's making Nigeria react so, spontaneously?
I think Nigeria, for the most part, Anthony, when you talk about international relations and diplomatic interactions overall, Nigeria has been the big brother, not just in Africa, but even far beyond this continent. And I'll tell you why. It will appear, okay, I was talking with a few colleagues a while ago, and one of my guys mentioned and said, well, he's surprised to see that Nigeria repatriated a non-national...
The Frenchman...
exactly, the guy that was trying to constitute nuisance and all of that, all right, just over this weekend. See, thing is, Nigeria has tried as much as possible to bring common sense into the way it relates with other nations of the world. But for the most part, Anthony, what you find is it appears we're taken for granted,
True.
I mean, many more times than not. The fact of the matter is, countries just wake up, whether it's US today, Canada tomorrow, Britain the next day, and the next thing they're saying is don't go to Abuja. Be careful when you go to Abuja. If it's not central area, don't go to Gwagwalada, don't go to Zuba, don't go to this, don't go to that. Don't go to northeast, don't go to southeast and all of that. The thing is, how much of interaction do these countries have with the Nigerian authorities as to security situation in the country, what is being done, and so on and so forth, before you go all out? Of course, by all means, every nation has a fundamental responsibility to protect their citizens. You can't take that away. Of course, Nigeria also has that responsibility to protect Nigerians wherever they may be everywhere in the world. But when you go, just go all out with such an advisory, first of all, you're tearing the image and the fabric of that country one way or another. For example, we're here in 2022 when there was also an advisory, this time from the US authorities in Nigeria, in Abuja, saying that, look, there's a bomb scare in Abuja on such and such day. People should not go out. American citizens should be careful. They shouldn't go out. In fact, they should be evacuated. As a matter of fact, they deployed planes to pick up American citizens from the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport from here in Abuja. I mean, we've not forgotten that. That was barely 3 years ago, 2022. And nothing happened. There was no bomb scare. There was even no fireworks anywhere. But then you find every other country doing the same thing. Australia just did that again recently. And for Nigeria, I think it became a case of this is one nonsense too many. And what Nigeria did that is very mature is that it wasn't just a matter of, as we say on social media, a clap back. The idea was to say that there's a reason Nigerians should avoid certain places. Nigeria is not even telling its citizens in Australia to say, don't go to Canberra, don't go to Sydney, or don't go to Adelaide. They're only saying that be careful around such and such places. And these are the specific reasons. In fact, Nigeria even went ahead to give timeline to say on so and so date, in so and so city, so and so incident or event did occur. And the facts are out there. I think Nigeria has played the mature diplomat, so to speak, in this particular case. And Australia should be learning from Nigeria. Ditto other countries of the world, whether from the West, from Asia, from the Middle East, or from wherever. But again, it's a lesson in how countries should treat themselves, in how diplomacy should be played between or amongst nations of the world. Because whether you like it or not, Nigeria and Australia are friends. You can't take that away. I mean, we have a lot in common, whether it's in trade, diplomatic ties, and what have you. But you see, you don't want to throw all that away. You don't want to bungle all of that because you have some concerns around the security and safety of your people in this country.
Okay, let's look at, in terms of, you talked about the relationship between both countries. Now, in terms of Australia, the Prime Minister,
yes.
talking about Tony Albanese, do you think the current government of Australia seem to be very forward in its policies? Because recently there was a ban on children, underage children using the social media. Do you think the current government seem to be forceful rather than the laid-back Australian government we used to have in the past? And so vice versa, the current government we have in Nigeria. That's why we're seeing something that looks like a strain or back and forth between
in this relationship.
Yes.
That may be a part of it. You see, this whole thing, I can't say much about Nigeria in terms of ideological tendency, but in a place like Australia, it's a different kettle of fish altogether. So this current minister seems to be one with a hard line stance. In other words, if this is the way forward with regards to a certain policy or set of policies, there has to be this firebrand sort of approach to it. For example, you just made mention of a very brilliant instance, which is the issue of ban on social media for children of a certain age and all of that. In fact, many people in the global West would tell you that it's authoritarian for you to make such a move. That at that age, children should be able to have access to social media and all that. Yes, you may want to regulate, parental guidance measures and all of that, but not this kind of flat-out, universal, umbrella approach to it. Apparently, that's the same kind of method that's being applied with regards to the way Australia recently started relating with Nigeria, particularly when you look at it from the standpoint of this advisory, which, again, is very unfriendly in every sense of the word. But again, you see, when somebody tells you your breath isn't fresh, rather than get mad the entire day, ask yourself, how often do I brush? What kind of brush do I use? What brand of paste do I use? In other words, you have an issue with your oral hygiene that you've got to attend to after you don't be mad at that person. So what lessons should we be learning? One of them, very vital, Anthony, is that Nigeria must, by all means, as a matter of urgency, take a second look at its foreign policy direction. What is our foreign policy direction? How do we relate with China or countries from Asia? How do we relate with Oceania, whether it's New Zealand or Australia or all those other countries from around that region of the world? How do we relate with Europe? When you say EU, for example, how do we relate with North America, with the Arab world, with African nations, and so on and so forth? We've got to have clarity of purpose, clarity of vision about this whole thing. Because you see, when things like this happen, I can tell you almost authoritatively that it's not just a one-off or standalone incident. Most times they are tied to several other incidences from the past. How did we deal with those incidents? You see, the consolation I find from this is the response that Nigeria gave to Australia in this regard. And I'm hoping that we don't only sustain that sort of approach or attitude towards diplomatic issues, but that we continue to ramp it up and improve on it in such a way that we also need to be respected. Nigeria is not just a country that needs to go cap in hand every time. Nigeria has got to be respected. People want to come here to mine your resources. They want to come here to take your crude. They want to come here to take your doctors, your teachers, and what have you. Are they doing it respectfully? Or they are doing it because these people have no hope in their country, so let's help them out? Is that the approach? Or they are doing it because they know that your people are valuable and they feel privileged and honored to be able to take resources from your place, whether in form of human or natural? So Nigeria has got to earn its respect, and hopefully that process has just begun right now.
Just to add to what you've said, do you think it's also a sign, a very negative sign? Australia, we know, is down and under, and one of the last continent.
Right,
But
the end of the world, as they
the
say.
end of the world. But how sad is it that suddenly Australia, that used to be very peaceful, suddenly we're hearing racial profiling and harassment,
Right.
especially of Nigerians. What do you think is playing out? Is it that Nigerians, like you rightly pointed out, internet professionals are taking their jobs now? That's why they're beginning to, or it's an offshoot of what played out in South Africa while xenophobia took place. So other countries are beginning to use that same, model for Nigerians.
It's a very deadly model, Anthony, if that's exactly what the case is, with a big if, by the way. But again, we need to understand that Nigeria, it's not our fault that Nigeria has some of the best and finest professionals everywhere in the world across fields. Whether you go to the Gulf, you go to Europe, you go to Asia, wherever you go to, you have Nigerians bringing the best value everywhere. Defense, health, education, tech, even in the media where we are right now. Some of the biggest established media platforms across the world have Nigerians working there, whether behind cameras or in front of the cameras. So it's not our fault that we have the capacity and the can-do spirits to make these things happen. However, that also creates discomfort for many citizens from across this country. You mentioned South Africa a while ago. Xenophobia has been there for a while. But Nigeria, again, has shown maturity in managing these situations with South Africa over time, even before President Cyril Ramaphosa came into office. So you take it back to Australia, for example. Yes, we can pretend all we want, but we're going to wake up tomorrow morning and tell ourselves the truth. There are racial elements we can't take away. There is that. There is also the fear that if we leave these people to continue to quote and unquote fester, as a matter of time, they're going to take our jobs away and even add the women. Just on a lighter note. But the point is, you see, it is part of what globalization brings. You can't take it away. You allow us come to spend thousands of dollars to educate our children in your country. You don't have a problem with that. You allow us to come stay in your 5-star hotels and we spend thousands of dollars. You don't have a problem with that. So why do you have a problem with us coming to work? We're not just coming to work and we're bringing value, we're adding to the economy, we're taking the economy from point A to point B for you. Look at what is happening in the UK right now, for example. Just because the policy of that country was rejigged just over a year ago, now the UK government is under pressure as far as the university education is concerned in that country, because all of the monies you used to get from Africa and the rest of the world, particularly from Nigeria, is no longer coming. So you are now scratching your head as to how do we close that gap which has been created on account of the fact that the bulk of Nigerians that used to bring their money here have gone elsewhere. So you have lost customers.
All right, let's see how that's going to pan out, but very interesting talking point. Let's move on to coming down home here. Let's look at some health concerns also, as the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, has alerted Nigerians, including healthcare providers, about a counterfeit cancer treatment drug, Fesgo 600 milligram, and also 10 milligram labeled with batch number C5290S20. This is contained in the public alert available on the agency's website. The agency reported that the marketing authorization holder, Ma Roach, received a complaint from a doctor at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital regarding the suspected counterfeit product. He said the Fesgo labeled with badge number C5290S20 was reported to have been brought in by a patient for administration. According to the agency, at the time of the report, the product had not been administered, but it matched the characteristics of a previously reported counterfeit badge. Let's look at NAFDAC and the work they are doing. We remember the terms of DORA. We could trust NAFDAC whenever they came out with an alert, public alert. There was no debate whether it was sincere or if it was done for helping a specific brand to progress or not. Look at what's playing out for this. Cancer is a very serious, ailment. For such counterfeit badge, which was reported earlier, until this came out, don't you think NAFDAC was playing to the gallery, not alerting Nigerians even before this other, patients came? Yeah, because according to the report, they had gotten heads up before now.
So why did you wait this long? Did you have to wait for this other one to come up? You see, again, that's why institutional
mentioning the brand,
yes,
obviously seem to want to rubbish a particular brand.
But yeah, you see, institutional behavior is very important, Anthony. Institutions shouldn't behave like everyday individuals, right? Who can, they have more latitude to do certain things and maybe get away with it. But institutions like NAFDAC, not just because it's a public agency, but because it's one that focuses on health. I dare to say regulates how people live or should live, if you like, because NAFDAC regulates not just medicines, but food. Anything that you eat, including water, anything that goes into your belly, medicine, food, water, drinks, they are all regulated by NAFDAC. So government and the people of this country have relinquished that part of NAFDAC to say, look, help us determine whether this thing is healthy for us, whether it will kill us, whether it will make us stay alive, or even help us improve our lives. That's what we've done with NAFDAC. Now, Anthony just mentioned Professor Dara Akunyili of blessed memory. You see, again, on a very sad note, that just reminds us of how that this is the exact situation you have or you get when you build a system around one person. So when that person steps away for lunch, it becomes a problem.
Strong individuals, poise.
Right, exactly, frail or weak institutions, as they say. That's what we have right now. So the question is, who succeeded the late Akunyili? Is a question, all right? We've had at least 2 DGs since she passed. We had a gentleman there, and then we have Professor Adeyeye there now. We're not trying to scale them to say who is better, who is not better. But the question is, what has been the trajectory since she left NAFDAC? Because she left NAFDAC, went on to become a minister.
Yes, sir, true.
After she left, what has happened differently? Are we doing better? Are we sustaining, or if you like, are we able to even build on what she left? Yeah. Exactly. Or we are even retrogressing as it stands right now? Those are the questions. NAFDAC is a public health agency that people should even fear. The way people used to fear road safety in the 80s and in the 90s. But this day and age, people even doubt these days whether a NAFDAC label is authentic or not. Because we have seen even NAFDAC themselves, officials of NAFDAC themselves, go to some factories to raid. They come out and say they found fake NAFDAC labels. So does NAFDAC not need house cleaning at this point? Of course, the obvious is the answer. NAFDAC means house cleaning. All right, who are those officials on the inside, no matter how highly placed or lowly ranked they are, who are compromising the standards of NAFDAC? NAFDAC has minimum standards, and everybody in this country, or you're bringing stuff into this country within the purview of the mandate of NAFDAC, must be subjected to those requirements, those regulations. There's nothing you can do about that. And NAFDAC should not come off as one that is trying to promote one brand while trying to maybe exactly.
Even they've come out to say they're certain. They're only saying the batch number matches what they were earlier told. So exactly. It's not confirmed. So why name the institution?
Exactly. You see, and again, more importantly, going forward, Anthony, what are you going to do with this information beyond bringing it to the media? That's even more important than this conversation we're having.
All right, so let's see what's going to pan out. But NAFDAC pointed out that the first go 600 milligram solution for injection is used to treat breast cancer, as it works by killing cancer cells and preventing their further growth. It stressed that illegal marketing of counterfeit medicine was a serious health risk. Just before we leave that talking point, we used to have a cancer center. What do you think is happening? Because it was floated by Mr. President's wife, I think, Obasanjo.
No, it was late Musa Yar'Adua's wife. Yes, the International Cancer Center.
It was supposed to be Nigerian. And since government is continuum, we expected the government, as successive governments, should have, supported
that project. Anthony, it's a sad conversation to have. I won't lie, because I remember
if they were working, this wouldn't.
Of course, we won't be having this conversation the same way we're doing right now. I remember I watched the fundraiser when it was put up, and the billionaires and multimillionaires in this country were there. The leaders of business, top politicians, and all the people in between.
And they were generous.
They were there. Yes, of course, they were generous. I remember one billionaire, for example, who gave 500 million right there and said it was available, was giving it right there, and they said they should pick up a check of 500 million again by the next week, Monday. I remember very clearly. So people came out to give in hundreds of millions and all of that. We've not been able to tabulate exactly what the bottom line is in terms of, what the total sum is. But common sense tells us, for those of us who followed at that point, that it was in billions. So the question is, did that project take off at all? If it did, is the progress made so far commensurate with the monies that were realized. Let's forget about what was announced, what people announced, the pledges that were made. But what was realized? Is it in tandem? Does it align with the progress or the amount of progress we are seeing with that project? Is the government of today, or even the one before this one that spent 8 years, even thinking of that project? You see, I don't think we should be here talking about International Cancer Center, Anthony, if we have not paid so much of attention to our healthcare sector, because cancer is a health threat, it's a health problem. So if you're not dealing with the umbrella issue, which is the health issue, so how are we talking about cancer? So it's a problem of, we're leaving the fundamentals and we're moving up to things that are obviously at the very top of the ladder. So let's deal with the fundamental issues. Do we look at primary health care, for example, PHCs? How much are we funding them? How many professionals do we have running those places? People are still going to teaching hospitals, to federal medical centers for headache, for malaria, for typhoid. Is that where it should be? You're not supposed to be doing that. Who says a woman who lives in a place like Gwagwalada or Abaji or say Kuje cannot go to a local health center to deliver her baby safely and go home? No. Everybody has to come to Ogariki. Everybody has to come to FMC. Everybody has to go to one teaching hospital or another. Do you blame us? Because the person who has health concerns or a woman who needs to deliver a baby is only concerned about her safety. They are not very careful about the hierarchy of healthcare facilities, whether it's primary or secondary or tertiary or whatever it is. People just want to get well, and that's the end of the story. So the issue of International Cancer Center is something that probably the EFCC should even look into if they ever have the time to do that. But for today, the important thing is just a gross reminder of how that we need to take immediate steps to salvage our health care sector.
Very sad commentary there, but that's the way to go. Let's move on to the next talking point. The presidential candidate of the NNPP for 2023 presidential election, Rabiu Kwankwaso, is saying that northern leaders have been spreading false news across our 2027 polls. And we'll be looking at that talking point after this break. Please stay with us. All right, welcome back from the break. As we reach the business end of the program, let's delve into politics. As the presidential candidate of the NNPP in the 2023 general elections said their action was causing division and hindering democracy by electing leaders who were not qualified. Kwankwaso, who started this in an interview with the BBC Hausa, said events that unfolded in the previous elections should make the leaders refrain from anything related to this selection of candidates and allow the people to choose who they really want to be president. That is the focus of our talking point this evening. It looks like Rabiu Kwankwaso is, I don't know if he's being realistic or he's living in, like they say, past glory, or he believes the people of Kano can vote him and he will become president. He's not open to mergers, but he's talking about allowing the people decide who is president. Is he being realistic? Well, our democracy hasn't gotten to that level where truly the people can decide who becomes president.
You know, they say politicians speak from both sides of their mouth, but I think sometimes they speak from more than two sides, maybe up to 8. It depends on the circumstance. Okay, let's create a bit of perspectives and maybe hopefully find insight. Engineer Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso had been governor of Kano, of course, before now. He had also been a minister in this country. He has been in the PDP, he has been in the APC, he has gone back to the PDP, and then he's now in the NNPP. And people say he's the de facto leader of the NNPP. Others say he's a factional leader. But what we do know, I mean, some of the facts real quick is that the relationship, at least politically speaking, between Engineer Kwankwaso and the governor of Kano State, Abba Yusuf.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not at his best right now. In fact, he's a bit rancorous, even though they're not going to bring all of that to television, because the ANPP, I should say the NNPP is also cannibalized, for lack of better words, because you have factions in that party as it stands right now. Other people say, well, for whatever it's worth, Kano State belongs to Engineer Kwankwaso on account of having been governor of that state before the Kwankwasia movement, and so on and so forth. But there are analysts who say that the dynamics towards 2027 are different. So if Engineer Kwankwaso thinks this is 2019 or 2023, he's making a big mistake politically, because 2027 will be different for everybody, including for the incumbent president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, because of what has and will continue to change between now and election day in 2027. Now, having said that, you make mention of how that it doesn't look like he wants to budge in terms of maybe measures and trying to maybe exactly reach out to Labour, PDP, and all of that. We had seen that play out in the build-up to the 2023 general election as well, because he had said very categorically, without missing words, he said, look, myself and Obi or any other person for that matter are not merging. I cannot be vice presidential candidate to someone like Obi, for example, because I'm more experienced than him. And he goes out to read out his CV, right, on national television, just so people understand that he's far more qualified than Obi to be president. Therefore, he cannot be his running mate. But you see, again, everybody can make that boast. Obi can make that boast.
Doesn't that contradict what he's saying, that he wants the people to decide?
You see, when he says, I'm coming to that real quick. When he says he wants the people to decide, the question is, when last did the people decide in Nigeria, for example? It's always the political class deciding for Nigerians at the local, state, and federal levels. That's been the reality, even though that's not the ideal. So when you say you want the people to decide, if the people decide that it's someone else, would you be satisfied? Because when politicians sound like this, it's a one-way traffic. It has to be me for me to believe that the people decided. If it's someone else, it's not the people decided. It was rigged against me. So what if the people decide that it's Atiku or is Obi or is President Bola Tinubu to carry on for a second term? What would you say, for example? So the thing is, I think it's time people like Engineer Kwankwaso, with so much of experience in the policy, across board, should realize that there's something called inter-party politics, where you leave your partisanship aside for a second and you pursue common goal, regardless of whether you become the presidential candidate of the party or not. And the ANPP, the ACN, and several other parties have shown us that example in 2013, 2014, and we now understand what happened in 2015 with the emergence of Muhammadu Buhari as the candidate of that party and later the president of that party. But you need some sort of leadership, the kind that someone like Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu created, provided at that point, that led to that merger. You see, I've heard people say things like, we are going to unseat APC, we're going to, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you do it within the ambit of the law and you go to the ballots to make that change. But the question is, you must also know that to whom much is given, much is expected. That goal is a lofty goal. That objective is a tall one. The question is, are these politicians and their respective parties as it stands today ready to pay that price? Bola Ahmed Tinubu came out and told you that it took him 20 years to prepare to become president. In the meantime, he was busy building a party called ADC, AD, all the way to AC, to ACN, and later to APC. So you must know that it's an amalgamation of parties and individuals that you're trying to dismantle, and you are not going to go to bed the whole night to be able to put up that battle. So the question is Engineer Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso ready to go the long haul?
All right, so hopefully one day on the desk we'll have Engineer Rabiu Kwankwaso join us and probably answer this very big question which Uya Bomofegwe has asked. And that's how we're going to draw the curtains on today's edition of the program, The Desk. I want to say thank you very much for a very fantastic show. Thank you very much. All right, so that's how we call it a wrap on today's edition of the program, The Desk. I am Anthony Momodu. Good evening.